Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everybody, I am really delighted to introduce my guest today, Charlotte Japp. Charlotte is the founder of Circle, a company that connects older and younger professionals for mutual personal and professional growth. After graduating from Georgetown University, Charlotte started her career in creative marketing and saw the consequences of age segregation in the workplace. Older and younger professionals needed to connect and learn from each other, but had no way to meet. Circle makes networking across generations seamless, inspiring, and impactful, working with both individuals and corporations to bridge the gap. Charlotte was named one of Next Avenue's 2020 Influencers in Aging and a 2020 Gen to Gen Innovation Fellow. She has been featured in publications like the New York Times and spoken internationally about the magic of connecting generations. Please join me in welcoming Charlotte Japp. Welcome, Charlotte.
Thanks so much, Tammy.
It's great to have you here. I know we are talking with you from your offices and home in New York City, and I am so excited to have you here. I think what you're doing is so important and so unique. But before we get to that, I also want to tell people that Circle is spelled Cirkel, and we will get to that in a little bit. So tell us, though, maybe a little bit about your earlier years. You know, on Work from the Inside Out, I always like to ask people, what were some of your earlier years like, or how might they have informed where you are today?
Yeah, well, in the very early years, my first 2 years, I lived in Paris, France, where I was born. And my parents moved over to New York when my dad got a job in advertising. So I don't really have a lot of memory of living in France, but I think the fact that we moved over as basically immigrants and we didn't have family in the US or in New York meant that we were a really tight-knit family. And I'm the oldest of three. So I have a younger brother and a younger sister. And I think those early years were really sprinkled with great interactions with my parents and their friends. And both of my parents worked in creative fields. You know, I mentioned advertising, which was my dad's primary career. And he later went into stamps and coin dealing, but he had an auction business. And my mom worked in the auction business as well, but for 20th century design and contemporary art, which is what she's still doing now. So I had a really kind of colorful New York cultural upbringing. You know, we went to a lot of museums as a family. We watched a lot of old movies as a family. My parents loved the good life. We went on some great trips and they always wanted us to go back to, France or the south of France or St. Bart's, because it was like a mini France, you know, with tropical trees and all that good stuff. And we loved going, to New York City restaurants. And so I really feel like my youth was really creative and we were encouraged to find things that made us happy. And I think me and my siblings, we all just kind of latched on to visual, like creative, but like making things. And we were really encouraged to do that. You know, my dad would kind of say, like, when I was your age, I was in my room drawing, because I wanted to be a designer, like couldn't help it. And he kind of like egged us on, what is the thing that you want to do? Like pursue it, make it.
Nice.
So, yeah.
A lot of people I talk to who grew up in this country, in the US, I would say probably weren't encouraged in that way. Not that they weren't given opportunities to be creative, but I would say probably weren't necessarily encouraged to see that through to the extent it sounds like you were, because oftentimes those kinds of pursuits were seen as, that's not practical, And so it's kind of refreshing to hear how that was encouraged in that way. Just in the way you describe it, it sounds like it was really woven into the fabric of your family in that way.
Now, so like we've been talking about my move, and we're selling our apartment where we grew up, and we lived here for 25 years on the Upper West Side. And I look around and it's like, truly the embodiment of that upbringing, where there's art on the walls and just interesting fixtures and books everywhere. And we were very like kind of stereotype, Upper West Side family in that sense.
So they're in the process of selling that now.
Yep, it's sold. We're actually moving out next week, officially.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, so that's a big move.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So speaking of transitions.
Yeah.
So you were encouraged to be creative, to be visual and all of that. Where did you take that as you grew up?
Well, it's interesting because my dad was British, and he did the whole boarding school system and was very strict about school. And it was really important, as much as he pushed us to be creative, it was also really important to do well in school. And I ended up going to a private school on the Upper East Side for middle school and high school, where the academics were really rigorous. And I really latched on to writing and reading and history and art, but like art history.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was interesting because I kind of had this balance of left brain, right brain, being really interested in analytical and kind of curious from an intellectual standpoint. But then I also felt like I had this creative fire and I didn't really know how to express it. So I basically ended up copying my dad. We grew up dissecting TV commercials together. So I went into like the modern version of advertising, which essentially is working in media.
Yeah.
And I worked at Vice Media in Brooklyn, and I got a really amazing job out of college that was called a junior creative role. And it was on this new-ish team called the creative team. And it was responsible for working with brands outside of Vice to partner with them in really innovative ways, like creating video content together or events. It really was an open book. You could do whatever you wanted that you thought made sense for that brand.
And so what did you major in at Georgetown, and how did that lead to that role in Brooklyn? I'm just curious, because that sounds like the kind of role you would have to have certain skills or have a connection, or you'd have to have something to be able to get your foot in the door, in that kind of a door, I would think, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially in that time period. I graduated college in 2013.
Yeah.
And it was like the height of online content, like longer form content. Now it's very short. Yeah. But back then people were watching, 10, 20-minute long documentaries on YouTube. And that was innovative, moving away from the TV screen to your computer screen. And Vice, had kind of this cool factor, and especially with young men, which were kind of hard for advertisers to reach. So, but back to your question, I studied comparative literature at Georgetown. I did French and German. That was my way of kind of reconnecting with my family background and kind of trying to become fluent in those languages.
Wow.
And then I minored in art history, and I used all of those pieces together for my thesis senior year. But I did a lot of extracurricular. I'm an extracurricular person. Like my whole life. It's been clubs after school and balancing like the academics with some cool like projects. So I was on the radio station at Georgetown and kind of like, I felt like I was helping to resurrect it because I had a really big impact in the 80s. And I think it was the Reagan administration that shut down the FM stream. So they went to the internet and so it had this kind of revival that was really cool to be part of. And I did a lot of internships in magazines, and I was kind of just trying to figure it out. Like, how do you take writing and this kind of analytical brain, apply it to something more cultural and like cool and creative? So with this role at Vice, like the job description literally said, we're looking for hybrid creatives, people that have their fingers in a lot of different pots. And that's how I felt. I loved music. I loved film. I loved art. I loved books and literature. And like, I didn't know how to find a role that allowed me to do all of those things.
So you found that role through some kind of a job posting or something? Or
yeah, it was listed on their website, but the real, to your point, I did have a connection. It was a girl who went to my high school, 2 years older than me. Yeah. And she was working there, and I could see on social media that she was like loving her life working there. So she made the connection back when Vice was a much smaller company. Yeah. And I was introduced to the guy who would become my boss immediately. So it was nice because I feel like I did get in before I had gotten to that larger company stage.
Yeah. Oh, it sounds like a wonderful way to get your foot in the door, but it does sound like you definitely had to have something that they needed to get in there as well. It just sounds like a very unique opportunity. So, it sounds like one of those jobs where you really got to learn right on the job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. I think that was the thing. Like I didn't, I guess like the role was a blend between being a copywriter and an art director, but I wasn't particularly like specialized in either of those things. And I think it worked well for the role because what they really were looking for was the initiative to create. And I had at that time a Tumblr blog with a lot of like kind of mood boards and interesting playlists I put together on SoundCloud. Like it was just my expression of like what I was interested in. Yeah. And I think it served as a portfolio, even though I didn't have experience at a portfolio school or any traditional kind of marketing work under my belt. So I showed that to the person who hired me. And I think he just liked hearing like my thinking pattern and seeing, the things that inspired me. And I think I always recommend that to young professionals coming out of college. Unless you go to like Miami Ad School, you're not really going to have like the cookie cutter portfolio. Right. So you really need to just show that you care enough to make it either way, to put it together and express yourself, and not wait for the opportunity. Don't wait to get the job to put the work out there.
I love what you're saying. I love it. And what you're saying, is so important for anybody at any age. I want to be clear. So, we're sitting here and you said, I graduated college in 2013, which means you're still on the younger side, although it's still, you've been out many years now. But I've been out many more years. Yeah. And yet I love the example of how you got your foot in the door and you showed up with what you had, and you really showed up for who you are and how you think and the way you create. And I think it's the best piece of advice you could give anybody who's trying to establish themselves in some kind of a way, whether it's in a creative arena or any kind of arena, to be able to just show an employer who you are and not just that you can check off all the boxes. Because
100%.
A lot of people out there who can check off all the boxes, and the only way you're going to distinguish yourself is by showing up as who you are. And because I mean, there's a ton of, well-educated, highly qualified people who can check off boxes. So how do you show that you have something to offer beyond that?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it sounds like that must have been a tremendous experience. How long were you there for?
I was there for 5 years.
Oh,
and yeah, which I think in millennial terms is pretty good, pretty long.
It's like, that's like a lifetime.
Yeah. And honestly, like sometimes I think, what if I had stayed? Because I really felt like I had a good thing there. Like I really did feel like I was doing work that I cared about, and that people knew me and they trusted me. But at the same time, I had that kind of itch, like, and that feeling that I was always going to be seen as a fresh out of college colleague. And maybe in hindsight, that was me just being naive or something. But I really did feel like, okay, I'm basically at maybe a manager level now, whatever that means. I'm like 5 years into a career. I have really good work in my portfolio, more professional work than my post-college portfolio. And I was kind of ready to, like, I don't know if this sounds lame, but I was ready to make better money, to like grow up a little bit, start living a little bit more of an adult life. And I think that I was locked into like a really, I got there so early on in the company's, I mean, it's like a 25-year-old company. So it wasn't that early in the history, but like it had done a lot of maturing since I left. So I ended up moving to Live Nation, which is a big music, concert, and festival company.
Yeah.
And I had a great experience there. They treated their employees very well. It was all of the benefits, that you could dream of, and just a great feeling of like being taken care of by your employer.
Wow.
But I'll say, the work was less exciting. So there are trade-offs.
What kind of a role did you take there?
So it was similar in that they had a team that they called the creative team, and they were still tasked with working with brands outside of the company to find partnerships. But those partnerships were primarily experiential marketing. So like a pop-up at a music festival, or a concert that you put on from scratch, to celebrate a certain artist with a brand sponsoring it. And those are things, I love music. I was on the radio station. Like I was always very excited about being part of the music industry.
Yeah.
But the company was so much bigger that my role, which had once felt really startup-y with like running my own projects at a very like early age, all things considered of how much experience I had, like I was doing a lot. And I loved that feeling of like being a little entrepreneur on my own projects. And then to go from that to your job is to write this tagline, like just this thing, focus on that. And it just felt really limiting. And I felt like I wasn't growing as a creative, as a professional. And it was during the transition from Vice to Live Nation that I also launched the seeds of Circle, something called Circle that was a little bit different than what it is now. And I was very addicted to it. So I was like, I had a mistress on the side that I was really excited about.
That's funny. Yeah. So that was probably like 2018, 2019 already, right?
That was 2018. Yeah.
2018. Exactly. So fold in that part of the story. When did you, what sparked the idea for Circle, or whatever you were calling it at the time? When did you start to think about the generations in the workplace, or however you were thinking about that? What really sparked that interest?
Yeah. So I guess what happened was I was maybe having a transitional reflective moment about like what's coming next in my career. And I was looking back on the 5 years at Vice, and when just to backtrack to like those earlier years, growing up here, I did see both my parents get pushed out of corporate jobs at 45 and 50. Mm-hmm. And when it happened to my mom, I was 18, and I was kind of starting to see her as an adult, like I was growing up, and I was just really shocked at how that could happen, after 12 years at a company and winning awards for the work she was doing, 1 year, to feeling like, oh my God, my identity's gone. I put so much into this and it's not loving me back right now. And that really shook me. And so that had happened, before college. And then when I came back to New York after college, I moved home with my parents. And at that point, they were both working from home, building their own small businesses. And it was like a very up close look at what midlife careers look like for a lot of people. And they would share with me a lot of like the wisdom that they had accumulated about going to work, because I was like, oh my God, my first real job, post-college job. And there were a lot of problems that I had, because I was just navigating office politics for the first time.
Yeah.
And I hadn't learned to advocate for myself. I was just learning a lot of things.
Yeah.
So they were kind of like my coaches, my kind of back of the, back of the house, like secret coaches, like, my secret weapon. Yeah. And then they had a lot of challenges with starting a business that were kind of easily remedied by my kind of ground floor perspective on the social media channels they should be using and how to use them, and interesting email software that they should be using instead of like Outlook, which may have been their company's standard, like now they can make those decisions for themselves.
Right.
So the mentorship was truly two ways. And I knew from kind of hanging around with my friends at work that this mentor motif, or like, like sparkly magical thing, like it almost seemed like it didn't exist because no one knew where to find them.
Yeah. What's interesting too, or what occurred to me at least, is that especially because you were in a field like advertising and marketing, which, at least in my experience, has notoriously been very youth oriented. And the clients that I've had when they get into their 40s and 50s, if they want to change jobs, it's almost, and I'm not one who usually says things like this, but it is almost impossible for anybody with the marketing background, if they're middle-aged or older. Most marketing departments, marketing jobs, they're going to younger folks usually. And I'm not saying that there's anyone in particular who's doing that to them or whatever. Mm-hmm. It does seem like that field does seem to be a very young field in many ways. I don't know if that was your experience or if that was part of what you were noticing, but it's something that I've noticed over time. And it occurred to me, knowing, what your background was, but it's just what a juxtaposition between probably what you were doing at work and then what you were noticing at home, and all the up close and personal experiences you were having watching your parents in their transitions. And it sounds like you also had a very open relationship with them. So you really understood how this was really impacting them in ways that I bet a lot of your peers did not see if their parents were going through something like that.
Yeah, it's true. I was really like in it with them every day.
So what I'm curious about is the translation, though, of witnessing all of that to then wanting to actually do something with those observations and those insights. Because I could see where you would see all of that and think, wow, look at all the different generations, how we really could be helping each other out. Because I hear people say that all the time, but I don't think there's a lot of people out there doing anything about it like you are. So I'm curious about what compelled you to then start to do something about it.
I remember a very clear moment. I had a little bit of a eureka moment, which happened when I was still at Vice, and I was waiting to go into to walk on set for some production we were working on. And I was listening in the car to a podcast that was a Planet Money podcast. The episode is called Here We Grow Again, if anyone wants to listen to it. And it was recorded leading up to Donald Trump's election. It was when he was still on the campaign trail, I guess, or maybe it was just after he had been elected. But basically the podcast was talking about a labor shortage problem. And the hosts, are these two young people, and they start like kind of shuffling through all the ways that we could approach the labor shortage issue. And I guess in terms of the election, Donald Trump was promising a certain GDP growth. And they were saying the only way that we'll get there is if we fix the labor shortage problem. And they go through like automation, getting more robots, basically. Do we get more immigrants? And they kind of like quickly land on, we have all these older workers who, are looking for work and they have a lot of experience, but then they just move on. They're like, nope, they're too old. And I was just like, whoa, this is like a huge opportunity. Like, not only is this something I've seen anecdotally in my life, but they've basically laid out like the economics of why we need to be smarter about the talent in the talent pool. And that like, getting more robots to do human jobs is like not necessarily the solution, and getting more immigrants, like, sure, like we can have immigrants, but that's not going to solve like this huge problem. And so I got excited because I felt like, that my brain kind of looked, I guess my comp lit background plus like the brand work I was doing was sort of like, ooh, these are like two pieces that actually fit really well together. Yeah. And why isn't anyone else putting them together? So I got really excited. I started just writing down some ideas right then and there. And, it's not a coincidence that I did go into Live Nation, because events were always something I was really into. And I put on a lot of cool branded events when I was at Vice. So I guess for me, the most direct way to use my talents to connect people was through an event. So I basically started organizing the first event, which actually ended up taking place June 2018. And I think that eureka moment happened like in the fall prior. So maybe that was even 2017, like fall 2017. Oh, so wow. It really took a while to like marinate, and I didn't know how to find a venue, and I didn't know who would like, what would the programming be? Would there be a speaker? Like, I wanted it to be fun and cool. I wanted it to feel like an event that I would put on for Vice. I was like, okay, we need to have a bar and drinks, we need to have really interesting speakers. We need to have like a bit of facilitated networking, but like not in a dorky way, like all these things that I kind of was starting to like put together. And
what was your goal for this first event? What did you envision?
I basically wanted to create like a really cool, fun party that I wish I would have access to. Like in my mind, the best parties were like the ones that my parents would put on with their friends, like really interesting people of all different backgrounds, hanging out together, kind of talking to people they wouldn't normally talk to, having a drink, like just a really interesting room. And I felt like a lot of the rooms that I was circulating as a 27-year-old, 28-year-old were like a lot of the same. So I was kind of seeking out like these interesting worlds of like interesting people being brought together. And so I wanted the event to obviously bring older and younger people together, but just like interesting brains together who could have like great stories, and like a good conversation.
Wow. So you had this idea. Did you enroll anybody else to help you pull that together, or to what degree was this just your own idea and you ran with it?
I guess I really lone wolfed it. I just was like, this is my thing. And I don't know why I did. Yeah, I didn't really bring anyone in. I had friends like who helped me come up with the name Circle. Like that happened on a trip to Stockholm, because the circle is a Swedish word. And I had friends that I would like kind of brainstorm with. But in terms of like putting the pieces together, I just felt so excited about it. It was like consuming all of my free time. And I treated it like I treated the branded work I was doing.
Wow. So from the moment you started thinking about this to the actual event, was there at a period of months, or how much time did you spend on this?
Well, from that first eureka moment to June was like 9 months. And I think part of it was that I got really stumped on the venue. I was like, venue costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
I don't have that.
Yeah.
I was just thinking through like, what are my options? And I was kind of lucky because I ended up going to a Georgetown professor's poetry. Oh no, I guess it was a prose. He'd written a book. So it was like a reading at the Bowery Poetry Club. Mm-hmm. And that was on the Bowery. It was a beautiful venue. And they have a bar there. I had all these little ingredients. And I was like, wow, this is such a great space. And I went on the website and they're like, we love community events, like pitch us. And so I pitched the idea and it was very community focused. So they were like, we love it. Let's do it. And there was a kind of a revenue share model, where you split up the ticket proceeds. And I didn't even like think about making money off of it. I was just like, great. I have a way of like paying for this venue.
Right.
And there's a funny like side story where they basically emailed I made a new Gmail account, but I actually wasn't checking it. So they had emailed that Gmail account and it took 2 months for me to even realize that they had said yes. Oh. So silly. I can't even imagine myself doing that now. But so for whatever reason, it got kind of delayed and it happened in June. And we ended up actually making like $200. Like we paid the venue and then like we had enough tickets sold that I made a little money.
So who did you invite? How did you figure out who was coming to this?
It was super stressful. It was like, it was like this interesting moment where I put all of my like pride behind me and just asked everyone that I had like been somewhat, like inspired by, or like a friend or their parents, and asking to like for literally friends' parents' emails so I could just reach out to them.
Yeah.
I posted on Instagram too, but a lot of like one-to-one emails, just being like, hi, I haven't spoken to you in a while. I started this thing. I think you're really cool. I'd love for you to be there. And I asked a lot of my friends to drag their parents there. Yeah. But I will say that there were also, there are a lot of small story moments where like a friend's parent ended up being a big anti-ageism advocate. And she flew in from Denver to attend because she was so excited. Oh. And so she brought some of her friends and they made a whole trip of it. I mean, it was insane because she never even came to New York to like see her son, but she was so excited about this event. Yeah. And that actually was really important because those people, I still talk to them. Like they're still really involved in the space. And it was just kismet that I met them at the first ever Circle event.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. How many people came to that first event?
The question, I think it was 75.
That's
80?
Great. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, really, it was so fun.
Was just a few years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess like 3 years ago.
So, well, we also know that you're not working for Live Nation anymore.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I stopped working for them right in the thick of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I won't sugarcoat it. I was laid off and furloughed, then laid off. And
that happened. I mean, that happened to a lot of people.
Yeah. And it was an interesting meta moment because I was I talked to a lot of people who get pushed out of work. And obviously this was not an ageist layoff, but it was like, wow, I really understand from a new layer now, like what this feels like and the uncertainty that comes with it, the panic, the freedom too. Like, oh, wow, I can refocus my energy and maybe this is a blessing. And so all the feelings that come with, losing your job.
Yeah.
I really understand them.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, like I said, the blessing of having more time for Circle, and it was kind of a weird, nice time to be like hunkered down. I felt like I have a lot of, back then I was a 20 something, now I'm a 30 something. And I felt really distracted by a lot of like social events in New York and feeling like pulled, work, friends and family, and then like this passion project. And the pandemic was a really great time to just focus.
Yeah. So during that time after you got laid off, what were your plans, or what were your thoughts? Were you thinking you'd look for another job, or how did you go forward from there?
No, it was like, this is like me bearing it all, but basically I was like, look, the world like gave me a tough situation, but this also means that I can get unemployment and I can move back with my mom and I can like prioritize like all of, my money and spending and like get really clear on what I wanted to do. So for me, I saw it as like, okay, this is the time to get really serious about Circle. My co-founder was in a similar boat where he didn't have something else to focus on either. Mm-hmm. And we had another teammate at that time. And so it was like this kind of cool moment where like, we just went really hard. And like, I was in my mind, I was like, oh, Live Nation will see, like, I'm going to like be so successful in a year. And like, the things that you tell yourself to just like keep going.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's not that simple, but
no,
Yeah.
Yeah. So now you've decided Circle is your full time.
Yeah, it's my full-time focus. I think, I'm still figuring out like what that means and where Circle's going. And, it's definitely grown since that moment, being laid off and focusing on it. And it's been cool to see like how much can come out of it by putting more in. And I'm just pushing along. It never really feels, I don't really know what like a milestone would be. I'm just kind of like continuing.
Well, I mean, I know a little more about it than our listeners. So one thing I know is that it is a membership-based entity now. And so there really is a model. It's not just you invite people to events and they pay to come to events to meet people of all different ages or backgrounds. There's a little bit more of a structure to it and an intentionality around it at this point. It has, maybe it's come out of its infancy and now it's a toddler or something. I don't know, the terrible 2s or 3s, mm-hmm. but it's definitely evolving. So tell us a little bit more about it. And also if listeners want to get involved, how they can get involved and what that looks like.
Yeah. So I'll say that the pandemic definitely validated a lot of hunches that we had about work and like accelerated those changes. Mm-hmm. And a big theme that we're seeing is the career transition. And that's true for early career professionals, maybe 7 years into a job that they realize that they hate, but don't want to get stuck. But it's also true for people in midlife who, similar to my parents, like, are faced with a change and whether they're ready for it or not, need to make a decision for what's next. And the thing that we've noticed, what's really interesting is that when you look at the career space, there are so many resources for early career talent, that they're inundated. There's a lot of like networking opportunities, mentoring opportunities, upskilling, all that stuff. But there really isn't a lot of attention paid to the needs of someone in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s who want to keep working.
Right.
And so that's really what we've now focused on. So with Circle, it's not a party series anymore. It's actually a virtual sort of networking service where we make introductions between older and younger professionals that we think need to learn from each other. And it's very anti-hierarchy. There's no mentor, mentee. Everyone is a teacher and everyone is a student. So if you sign up for a membership, you would do that through the website, circle.co. And you would start with an application where we get to learn a little bit about you and your goals and your skills and the things that you're looking to learn more about. And we do a quite white glove onboarding process where we interview you to further out, get the 360 picture. And then on the following first of the month, you get an intro with a bio that we write about you, so you're best represented, because we can be a little self-deprecating sometimes.
Yeah.
And we lay out the exchange, so it's really clear what we think you should be getting from each other, to avoid, the small talk and the beating around the bush. Like, just get into it and really share. And then we also have, members only gatherings that are focused on interesting trends that we're seeing in business or culture, or something called hot seats, where people share their challenges and everyone else gives their insights and advice. So there's a lot of different ways that our members interact with each other.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And this is all virtual at this point, right?
Yeah. So we're fully virtual. Some members in the same city, like in New York or LA, do meet up safely outside if they're vaccinated, but we leave that up to individual discretion. We don't force any in-person meetups.
So when you would match two people up, do they stay connected for a period of time? How do those matches work?
So far, we try to create enough structure so that you know what to do and how to meet people, but we don't want to force a connection if there isn't a natural spark. And that sounds like dating, but it sort of is when you're talking about mentoring and these kind of learning relationships. But so we essentially give you a ton of structure for the first meeting, and about 74% of our members actually plan a second meeting immediately thereafter, or at least indicate that they plan to stay in touch. So we know that the matches are really good, and the pool is really interesting, where people are really staying to meet as many other members as possible. Mm-hmm. But we don't want, I think a lot of mistake companies make is that they just assume okay, we've matched you together and you're good now forever. But we need to learn from all different kinds of people. So it doesn't really make sense that it's a one-stop shop for all of your mentorship. So yeah, we keep it open. We don't want to force the follow-ups, but maybe down the line we'll be more structured in that way. For now, it's not.
Right. So, and the memberships are a month by month kind of model. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The month, so it's $55 a month, or you could pay for an annual membership, which is $330. And it's obviously a much better deal. It's about a 50% discount. And we really think it's part of the ethos. It's not just jump in, jump out, but flexing that muscle every month, making room for one connection that you wouldn't normally cross paths with. And that encompasses all those things I mentioned, like the monthly introduction, the members only access to events, and some secret resources we have hidden on our website that you get through a password.
Like some sort of a portal or something?
Yeah, it's like a simple portal, yeah.
And is there a group forum or something where people can just write in and share ideas or have discussions amongst the larger group? Does any of that happen? Or do you really encourage more one-on-one kinds of conversations?
Yeah, I think in the future, we're curious about where that could go. I think for now, we like this kind of do it for me approach, where we're making these connections in a very thoughtful way. And I think the group meetups have been really good for exposing members to other members that they wouldn't necessarily be matched with, but might share a similar challenge or thinking about a similar topic. So it's something that we're thinking about, how can we further support these connections, but we also don't want to cannibalize something that we think is really valuable, which is this very thoughtful introduction.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And when you create these introductions, what's generally the difference in age or experience? Do you often match? What would I don't know if there's an easy way to ask this or to answer this, but what would a typical match look like in terms of age or experience, or are people matched with similar, sort of interests, or how do you make those decisions?
Yeah. a few different ways. So we have a few restrictions and a few kind of ways of prioritizing different people together. So for example, new members would never be introduced to other new members because we think it's really important that you're kind of onboarded that first month through a veteran member. Mm-hmm. We have a feedback form that we send at the end of every month. Those who actually give us preferences for the following month will be prioritized because we want to give our super users, so to speak, a nice priority because they've put a lot of thought into what they want. We want to reward that. But on the sort of like ranking side, we look for compliments. So when you sign up, you'll tell us some skills that you've mastered or that you're really strong at, but some skills that you're looking to improve. So we would look for the match to that, the compliment, where someone has the skills that you're looking to work on and they're looking to learn things that you're pretty skilled at. Mm-hmm. So that's also another piece. And we have some secret sauce, that happens on the back end that helps us make it happen. And that sort of helps us understand how some of these connections fall into buckets. But as an example, I'll just give you a quick example of a successful connection. I love this story, but it's one of the first matches that we made, literally September 2019.
Yeah.
And it was a woman, Leslie, and a woman, Kate. Leslie was 69 at the time. Kate was 29 at the time, 40 years apart in age. Both of them were generally interested in mental health. Leslie had worked for 40 years as a therapist, especially for women dealing with body image issues. Kate worked at a newspaper in brand strategy. And just kind of thought maybe I should be doing something with more purpose, something in mental health will be cool. So we put them together and it was really amazing because 2 years later, they're still in contact and they now have virtual happy hours with their partners. And basically what happened was Leslie was really looking to become a thought leader and sort of evolve her career out of the practice, but more into sort of public speaking and all of that. And so Kate tapped into her brand strategy experience and helped Leslie build a website that would showcase all of her thought leadership. And then on the flip side, Kate was so inspired by Leslie's work that she ended up deciding to apply to social work school. And Leslie helped her with the application. She got into a bunch of schools, but she actually just started at NYU's Silver School of Social Work.
Wow.
She just started last week. Mm-hmm.
Nice. I love that. That's a great example, and you can't make those things up. That's the kind of thing where I can also imagine that there are all kinds of other ways in which people help each other, even in a more short-term way. But I think that's wonderful. I love that.
Yeah. Even in smaller, that's an extreme, that's a big life change.
Yeah.
But even like you said, in small ways, if someone can show you a side of an industry that you'd never seen before, and maybe that's maybe that's an industry I should be looking into for my career transition. Mm-hmm. Great. That's valuable, even if it's really just here's a cool website. Sharing another connection, if you make introductions to other people, all of these things kind of expand your horizons. And it just goes to show when you stick with other people in your peer group exclusively, it really prevents you from growing in so many ways.
Oh, I love that. That's great. That's a beautiful thing. I love what you just said. When you stick with people in your peer group, it can prevent you from growing. And I think that, I was just thinking of something my mother-in-law always said to me. She always said, make sure you have younger friends. And I do. And, I think she meant it because she was outliving a lot of her friends. But I also think that there was something more to that, that you can have a lot of different people around you. And I'm finding now, in fact, that some of my daughter's friends have actually hired me to come into their organizations now to provide workshops and do some speaking engagements. And I look at them and I say, these are the kids. At some point I was driving them to in carpools, and now they're hiring me as professionals. And I look at them like they're colleagues now. And I'm excited about that. I think it's great.
I love it.
It's wonderful. And I really love the idea of working with people younger than me who can show me what's the best app to use for something so that I can work more efficiently or learn how to do something better. It's wonderful. There's so many. And I think that there's a lot of misunderstandings about the different generations and who we are and what our habits are, what our work ethics are. I think there's a lot of misunderstandings there. So I think what you're doing is really important, and we all need it. So I encourage people to look into it. So it's CIRKEL.co. It will be in the show notes and with any other connections and information. And just one last piece of advice, Charlotte. Since there's a lot of people listening to this who are thinking about what's next for them, what might be one key piece of advice that you would offer somebody who's thinking about their next move?
I'll share a piece of advice that we always give to our members, especially the new ones that we onboard, which is don't hesitate to ask, how can I help you? And I think on both sides of the age spectrum, sometimes we undermine our abilities and our experience. And we think we can't be helpful. Oh, that person's a digital native. How could I be helpful to them? Or, this person has 40 years of experience on me. How could I be helpful to them? And sometimes we forget our agency when we feel like we're making a transition, we're feeling vulnerable, we're feeling insecure, our confidence is shot. But actually, like, if you just dig into everything that you have accomplished, and you're generous with it, in whatever way that makes sense for you, you'll see that people are so welcoming of it. They're so used to being asked of things, like, can you help me with this? Can you connect me with this? And if you can offer a simple anything, connection, an article, whatever it is, just try to be helpful and it'll come back to you. And those are the connections that, might come back to you a month later and say, actually, I have this cool opportunity for you.
Well, and those are the things that really stay with people. People really remember those things. I'm glad you brought that up. That's great advice. Well, Charlotte, thank you so much for being here today. I'm really excited to put this episode out into the world and wishing you all the best with continued success with Circle.
Thanks, Tammy. I love your questions. This is a great conversation. Thanks.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Charlotte Japp. It was so interesting to speak with her and learn about her fascinating personal and professional journey. What is your key takeaway from our interview? If you are interested in any of the resources or links mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them on the blog page of my website at tammygoolerloeb.com. Just look for episode 149. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Or perhaps you're just feeling a little stuck. Stay tuned for my new book, Work from the Inside Out, Break Through 9 Common Obstacles and Design a Career That Fulfills You. It'll be available very soon, November 2021, in print and digital ebook editions through my website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and independent bookstores. If you were inspired by this episode with Charlotte, please share it with your friends and colleagues. And please do subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Remember, subscribing is always free. Are you enjoying the podcast? I'd be so grateful if you would write a review on Apple Podcasts. It's easy to find through my website at workfromtheinsideout.com. Just click on the Apple Podcasts button and follow the instructions provided there. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.